Good evening, everyone. This is Wayne from the Alchemical Tech Revolution YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to tackle part 2 of Melchizedek and the Mystery of Fire. Tonight, we're going to read the section here that starts at part 2 on page 23 of this book by Mr. Manly P. Hall. And we're going to hear some very shocking revelations in here tonight. This is getting into the really good part of the book here. The last video I did on this was just kind of a warm-up, the introductory part, and there was a lot of really great information in there as well. But this one, you're going to see a lot more information that's kind of very important here moving forward for people to understand, because a lot of the things that are admitted here in this book are not something that was largely meant for the public to understand or to know about. This was made primarily for the initiates of these secret orders, not for what they would call the profane, and that's you and me and just the regular Joe in the street. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Part 2. Man, the grand symbol of the mysteries. Pythagoras said that the universal creator had formed two things in his own image. The first was the cosmic system with its myriads of suns, moons, and planets. The second was man, in whose nature the entire universe existed in miniature. Long before the introduction of idolatry into religion, the early priests, to facilitate their study of the natural sciences, caused the statue of man to be placed in the sanctuary of their temples, using the human figure to symbolize the divine power in all its intricate manifestations. Thus, the priests of antiquity accepted man as their textbooks, and through the study of him learned to understand the greater and more abstruse mysteries of the celestial scheme of which they were a part. It is not improbable that this mysterious figure standing over the primitive altars was made in the nature of a mannequin and, like certain emblematic hands in the mystery schools, was covered with hieroglyphs either carved upon its surface or painted thereon with everlasting pigments. The statue may have opened, thus showing the relative positions of the organs, bones, muscles, nerves, and other parts. Gonna pause there, folks. Okay, what Mr. Hall is telling us here is in antiquity, these priests had this image, this model of the human body above the altars. And this reflects back to the ideology of as above, so below. Once again, because he's saying here that Pythagoras had said that the Creator formed two things in his own image. The first was the cosmos, or the cosmic system, as the grand thing, and the other thing was man himself. And this is an exact reflection of that as above, so below idea. So within man, we could see a reflection of the greater universe, and that's what he's talking about here. And he also talks about, in the ancient mystery schools, they put this giant mannequin figure up by the altars, and they use this as a teaching tool for people to understand how our universe works and how our bodies work. And let's get back into it here, because there's a lot of really interesting tie-ins here that Mr. Hall makes. Back to it. The present generation is prone to underestimate the knowledge of anatomy possessed by ancient races. Owing to destruction by time and vandalism, the available records do not adequately represent the learning of antiquity. Professor James H. Breastad, archaeologist of the University of Chicago, recently stated that his investigations showed that the learned doctors of Egypt during the 18th dynasty, that is, about 17 centuries before Christ, had a medical knowledge comparable to that of the 20th century. Professor Breasted is quoted as follows. For instance, in it, and it says in parentheses here, the Edmund Smith Papyrus, an early scientific document, the word brain appears for the first time recorded in human speech, and there is evidence that the Egyptians understood the localization of brain control of muscles, a knowledge that has only been rediscovered within the last generation. The knowledge which the Egyptian priest-physicians possessed concerning the functions of the several parts of the human body not only equaled that of many modern scientists, but as regards those functions and powers concerned with the spiritual nature of man, and organs and centers through which the spiritual essences control the body, their knowledge exceeded that of the modern world. During ages of research, much was contributed to fundamental principles of the early philosophers, and at the time Egypt reached the crowning glory of her civilization, the mannequin was a mass of intricate hieroglyphs and symbolic figures. Every part had its secret meaning. The measurements of this stone figure formed a basic standard by means of which it was possible to measure all the parts of the cosmos. It was a glorious composite emblem of all the knowledge possessed by the sages and hierophants of Isis, Osiris, and Serapis. Then came the time of idolatry. The mysteries decayed from within. The secret meanings were lost, and none knew the identity of the mysterious man who stood over the altar. It was only remembered that the figure was a sacred and glorious symbol of the universal power. This figure came to be looked upon as a god, the one in whose image man was made. The secret knowledge of the purpose for which the mannequin was constructed being lost, the priests worshipped the actual wood and stone until finally their lack of spiritual understanding brought the temple down in ruins about their heads, and the statue crumbled with the civilization which had forgotten its meaning. Today, the great faith of the white race, Christianity, is served by a great number of honest, sincere, devout men and women. While devoted to their task, they are only partly efficient because the majority of them are totally ignorant of the fact that so-called biblical Christianity is an allegory concerning the true spirit of Christianity and of that esoteric doctrine evolved in the temple by the initiated minds of pagandom and promulgated to serve the religious needs of the human race. Today, this faith is served by millions and understood by only a handful. For while the mystery temple no longer exists as an institution on the corners of the streets as it did in the ancient world, the mystery school still exists as an invisible philosophical structure. It admits into the knowledge of its secrets only a few, permitting the great mass to enter only the outer courtyard, and make its offerings upon the brazen altar. Christianity is essentially a mystery school, but most of its adherents do not understand it well enough to realize that there are secrets concealed behind the parables and allegories, which are an important part of its dogma. Gonna pause here, folks. Now, whether you believe any of this stuff or not, what you need to understand is there's people in positions of power in this world that wholeheartedly believe this stuff. And we could see, based upon some of Mr. Manly P. Hall's words here, that a lot of this stuff ties once again back to race. You see, he says today the great faith of the white race, Christianity, is served by a great number of honest, sincere, devout men and women. See, he's talking about race, and that's important, and we'll see why later. So all these secret societies always bring the whole race idea or racial idea into things here as well. And what he's talking about here as far as Christianity being equivalent to a mystery school, well, that could be debated. I don't doubt that there are secret teachings that are maintained within the Christian Bible and within Christian stories. And, you know, these teachings are quite possibly very valid. But also, we can't just dismiss the other aspects of Christianity here as well. And here's the thing. He talks once again about this mannequin figure. Once again, the symbol of man, using man as an example, as like sort of a teaching tool to understand the greater mysteries of the universe. And that's something that really truly is lost. And I think that there is a lot of sincere, good information within that. And we could stand to learn a few things from some of these ideas. But people have largely closed their minds down to things like that because it leans towards more a philosophical viewpoint rather than like the modern materialistic science viewpoint that we have today. So even though there is good scientific knowledge based there, as Mr. Hall pointed out here, the ancient peoples had much greater knowledge of the human anatomy and human body than we do even today. So you could see a lot of stuff has been lost through time and through dogma. And that's something we don't want to miss the boat on. But anyway, I don't want to babble too long about that, but let's get back to the reading here. Why should Christianity not be a mystery school? Its founder was an initiate of the Essenian mysteries. The Essenes were disciples of the great Pythagoras and were also connected with the secret schools of India. The Master Jesus was himself a Hierophant, deeply versed in the ancient arcanum. St. John, by his writing, proves himself to be acquainted with the ritualism of the Egyptian cult, and is contended that St. Matthew was the teacher of Basilides, the immortal Egyptian sage, co-founder with Simon Magus of Gnosticism, the most elaborate system of Christian mysticism that has ever evolved from the main stem of St. Peter's Church. During its early history in Rome, Christianity was in constant contact with Mithraism, the fire philosophy of Persia, from which it borrowed no small part of its rituals and ceremonies. If Christianity were looked upon less as a church and more as a mystery school, the modern world would rapidly gain a clearer understanding of its tenets. Every priest of Christendom, every minister of the gospel, should be an anatomist and a physiologist, a biologist and a chemist, a physician and an astronomer, a mathematician and a musician, and above all, a philosopher. By a philosopher, we mean one who could study intelligently all these different lines of thought and discover the interrelationship existing between them, and use all the arts and sciences as methods by which to interpret the magnificent emblematic pageant and mystery drama of the Christian faith. If they were to intelligently consider the secrets handed down from the priests of pagan antiquity, whose stupendous genius soared far above the rutted prejudices of modern thought, they would make a number of important discoveries. Gonna pause again there, folks. It's hard to disagree with Mr. Hall in that assessment, isn't it? I think he's absolutely right. By and large, much of the Christian church misses out on very many different concepts by thinking only in a one-dimensional type way about who God is and what he wants for us, and only looking at the literal interpretation of things. I think there's a lot of people that kind of miss the boat on a lot of these different things. It's so much richer in spiritual ideas when you're actually able to look at things through all these different lenses, as he spoke about here, looking at it from a scientific point of view, a philosophical point of view, mathematic, biology, physiological, all these different things. He's absolutely right. People who are sincere about their spiritual faith should be pursuing all these different avenues of thought and going at things from all these different avenues. I agree with that statement. Is he correct about his assessment of Christianity being a mystery school? Well, that's kind of hard to say, because there's just so much separation in time, space, and revisionist history in order to know exactly how everything all came about, per se. But there are a lot of really interesting points he's made here. But let's get back to the reading. First of all, they would discover that in the present translation of both the Old and New Testaments are numerous mistakes, owing to the fact that the translators were not spiritually competent to interpret the secret mysteries of the Hebrew and Greek languages. They would find numberless contradictions caused by misunderstanding, and would also discover that the so-called apocryphal books, rejected as uninspired, it says in parentheses, contain some of the most important keys which have descended to us from antiquity. They would learn that the Old Testament was not to be considered literally, that concealed between its lines were certain secret teachings, without which the true meaning of the Hebrew writings cannot be discovered. They would no longer laugh at the pagans for their plurality of gods, for they would discover that they themselves, if faithful followers of their scriptures, are polytheists. The word Elohim is used in the early chapters of Genesis, and translated God is a masculine-feminine plural word meaning a number of gods who are androgynous and not one supreme deity. They would realize that Adam was not a man, but a species, a race of creatures. They would also realize that the Garden of Eden was not located in Asia Minor. Gonna pause there, folks. Pay attention closely to what Manly P. Hall is saying here. He's talking about masculine-feminine plural word, Elohim, which is translated in most biblical accounts as God. There are some different facets to this word and its usage, and there have been numerous different usages of it throughout the Bible. And it is something that has kind of been mistranslated. I don't know so much mistranslated, but we don't have the correct words in our language to express it. But this is an idea that'll play out as important later. And he also says that Adam was not a man, but a species, a race of creatures. That's an interesting idea, too. And this is where the idea of evolution comes from, especially Darwinian evolution. See, these mystery schools, they've been teaching this from time immemorial, and that's why they push that idea so heavily of evolution in our modern world today. That's why it's been promulgated, and there's no real evidence to suggest that this is the case. So when they're talking about this stuff, they've kind of taken the lens of a modern scientific understanding and inverted it back on the original teachings, and you could see how this is kind of a perversion of the ancient mystery teachings, because to suggest that it was a race of creatures, he uses the word creature there, okay, that this wasn't an actual human being or a man per se. To suggest that goes against pretty much all the different creation stories that we've heard from numerous cultures from around the world. So you could see how they put this little twist in here. You get a lot of really good information, okay, from a lot of these Freemasonic texts and Rosicrucian texts and things, and all these mystery school teachings. But see, through the years, a lot of the original ideas have been kind of warped and twisted to present the viewpoints and the wants and desires of the initiates who've come forward through time, who've been keepers of this information, and they use it to suit their own agendas. And we'll see later, I mean, when you look at this, here's the idea that Adam was a different species, okay, not a human, and this is where the idea of evolution comes from. And intrinsically with the idea of this Darwinian type evolution also comes the idea of eugenics and a great master race and all of these different things. And we'll see how that all ties together here later. But let's get back to the reading. I don't want to, ramble on too long on one important point here. Let's get back to it. Even if some men knew these things to be true, a great part of humanity would still reject them because they would disagree with the accepted traditions, venerated not because they are true, but because they have been accepted for generations. They would crown their discoveries by a realization that the Holy Land of all nations is the human body, that this is sacred earth, consecrated to the gods. They would realize that their own bodies were the holy sepulchres that have long been in the hands of the infidel, and they would realize that there is no infidel of any race so heartless as the infidel which dwells in the heart of man himself, that there is no enemy to the faith like the lower nature of the individual. There is no Judas like selfishness, no betrayer like ignorance, no tyrant like pride, no Red Sea to be crossed like that which comprises the emotional nature of a man, surging outward from the red blood-forming centers in the human liver. If the modern theologians could see the ancient mannequin over the altar, they would clearly understand all this, but not realizing that there is a secret doctrine, they do not seek for it. Yet, who can read the book of Ezekiel and Revelation and not realize that the beloved disciple, John, transcending all the others in his vision, was indeed lifted up, or raised, as the modern Mason might say, and beheld the pageantry of the mysteries? The allegories of St. John are drawn from every religion of the ancient world. The drama which he unfolds in Revelation is synthetic, and therefore truly Christian in that it includes the great teachings of all ages. Gonna pause right there again, folks. Okay, listen to what he's saying here. First of all, he's admitting openly that they have this secret doctrine. See, they acknowledge a secret doctrine that they don't want the profane to know. And that's what he's talking about here. That's why I said in the beginning, this book is intended for initiates only. It was never intended to be available largely to the public the way that it is today. So, when he's talking about these things, this is not for the eyes of the profane. Okay, so he wants people that he's talking to here to understand that they follow this secret doctrine. And then he also goes on here to say that the disciple John got to see the pageantry of the mysteries, and that they were all drawn from all the different religions of the ancient world. But he also goes on to say, and I'm going to quote this sentence here again because this is important, okay? The drama which he unfolds in Revelation is synthetic and therefore truly Christian in that it includes the great teachings of all ages. Synthetic. Listen to that word. Synthetic. Artificial. Man-made. Inversion. Do you see how they twist things, folks? Inversion. So he's calling, in this sentence here, he's calling Christianity an inversion of truth. Okay, and this is where the setup begins, okay? When you look at this stuff, these people who follow some of these teachings, they see Christianity as a perversion of the ancient mystery teachings, when it couldn't be further from the truth. What has happened is they've perverted many of these things that are represented in Christianity because of everything, I would say, that goes back to the things that have happened to the Templars, and they still hold a grudge to this day, because you see all these orders are tied together and they stem back from those old orders of Templars and such. So they have this grudge against Christianity that's been brought forward, and through the decades and the centuries, the teachings have been twisted, and they teach the Freemasons that Christianity is the perversion, when in fact that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, the thing is here, but you see, he calls this synthetic. This drama which unfolds is synthetic, and therefore truly Christian. So see, he's equating the word synthetic with Christianity, and saying that it's phony, it's fake, it's a twisting, a perversion of the original. And he says that includes, because it includes the great teachings of all ages. So see, even though he admits that Christianity contains these great teachings of all ages, he's calling it a perversion here. And this is the mindset and the attitude that many of these occultists go in with, and that's why Christianity is persecuted the way that it is today, because they see it as a threat to their occult power. And, you know, that's the whole thing. They see it as a perversion, of the ancient secret teachings, and in so doing they want to eliminate that whole ideology, because they see it as being a synthetic thing. They don't see it as being a reflection of what it is that they believe. So anyway, not to dwell too long on that point, but let's read on. Some believe that God has not willed that man should understand the mystery of his own destiny, but let these recall those immortal words. There is nothing concealed that shall not be revealed. There is nothing hidden that shall not be made known. This being true, let us take up the labor of solving or unveiling, of reconstructing. Following in the footsteps of the illumined of all ages, we too shall discover truth by following the winding stairs up which the candidates of every nation and religion have passed, wearing ruts in the stones. The spirit of man is a tiny ring of colorless fire, from which pour streamers and rays of scintillating force. By a mystic process, the rays build bodies around the central formless germ, and man dwells in the midst of these bodies, controlling them by waves of force in a manner difficult to appreciate unless one is familiar with the occult constitution of man. This ring of invisible flame is the eternal fire, the spark from the infinite wheel, the birthless, deathless, eternal center, which includes within itself all that it has ever been, all that it is, and all that it ever shall be. This germ dwells in the state eternity, for to this immortal spark time is illusionary, distance is non-existent, joy and sorrow are unknown, for concerning its function and consciousness, all that can be said is that it is. While other things come and go, it is. Gonna pause there, folks. Now, do you see when he's saying it is, the way that this is a perversion of, in the Bible, how the Lord identifies himself as I am. See, he says it is. He's identifying this as something different here, okay? It is, and you'll recall from one of the previous videos I've posted that a lot of people in these secret orders, they believe in a force. The force, pretty much as like it's how it's represented in Star Wars. They don't believe that the great architect of the universe is the actual creator God. They believe that the creator is nothing more than a force, a natural force, and that the great architect of the universe is someone or something totally different from that, who learned how to use this force, this creative force. And see, this is where it gets to a disparity from different religious systems and other teachings here. And this is where it goes south in a hurry, because what these people believe is totally antithetical of what many of the ancient religions and different philosophies taught about God, the creator, and how man is created in his image. See, he's saying it is, and that's a direct inversion of the idea of I am. So you could see how this teaching is a perversion of that concept. Now, they may see it as being the other way around, and I don't doubt that, but it's all a matter of the perspective here as well. But anyway, let's get back to the reading. I'm going to clear my throat. This germ of immortality enters into the embryo at the time of quickening and passes out at the moment of death. With its coming, heat is generated. With its leaving, heat is withdrawn. As the flaming orb of the sun is in the mists of our solar system, of the solar system, so this flaming ring of spirit is in the midst of the bodies of man. It is the altar fire which never goes out, and to the service of this divine flame the wise of all nations have consecrated themselves, for in this flame lies all perfection and the possibility of ultimate attainment. This flame manifests individualities and personalities, but the extracted essences of experience, intelligence, and activity stored up in the individualities and personalities are finally absorbed into this flame, furnishing it with fuel, with which it gleams and burns more brightly. For this one altar fire, all of the fires in the human body are lighted, like the countless flames which have been started from the sacred fires of the Parsees. Compare the flaming spirit of man to the light of a candle. First, in the midst of the candle, close to the wick, is a glow, nearly colorless. Around this is a ring of golden light, and still further out, surrounding the yellow, is a deeper orange or reddish flame, which gives off more or less smoke. These three lights, blue, yellow, red, are closely related to the flame in man, for there is a blue, fuelless light, and there is a yellow light supplied by a pure oil that burns with a steady glow, giving no smoke. Then there is a red flame supplied with a coarser fuel. This is called the consuming fire of the ancients, for in the human body the blue flame is the clearly burning light of reason, illuminating the mind and lighting the darkness of the night, while the red flame is the false light, the fire of passion and lust. It is smoky like the battlefield, where hates and fears go up together in one seething, lurid sheet of brick-red flame. Gonna pause there, folks. You see how he's invoking these ideas of the red and the blue? That's a very important thing. This is contrasting masculine and feminine characteristics and properties here. There's a lot of things tied up in this idea, and that's kind of what he's alluding to here. But he equates the blue flame as the light of reason, illuminating the mind and lighting the darkness of the night. So the blue is a representation of a more masculine principle, in this case, the intellect, the brain. At least that's the impression I get from how he's talking here. And the red flame is a false light. So you see he infers this duality in man, and he separates out these principles. Now, red usually represents the masculine and blue the feminine, so I think I got that backwards. So the feminine would be the more intellectual side in this case, but once again, they like to swap these different meanings and stuff around for different things they're talking about. So they invert the properties, and that could be an inversion going on here as well. But you see how it contrasts intellect, the fiery nature of the intellect, the creative force of man, the intellect with the animal, lustful spirit. You see, it's this duality that we exist in. That's what he's contrasting here. But let's get back to the reading. These are the three fires: the fire of divinity, the fire of humanity, the fire of the demons. These three are enshrined within the nature of man, whence their radiance goes forth as the sacred trisyllabic word by which the heavens are created, the earth formed, and the works of evil destroyed. The disciples of the ancient wisdom realized that during the dawn of this earth's scheme, certain instructions were deposited in safe places by the sons of the dawn, or as we call them, the gods, and that after having ensured that these doctrines would be preserved for the ultimate salvation of the race, the gods entered into the constitution of man and lost their identity. For this reason it is said that the kingdom of heaven is within you, for the kingdom of heaven includes the divine Father, his Trinity, his seraphim, cherubim, powers, dominations, principalities, thrones, angels, and archangels. Each of these celestial creatures has contributed something to the nature of man. Through the power of one, he feels. Through the power of another, he sees. Through the power of a third, he speaks. Through the power of a fourth, he understands. Through the power of the divine Father, he is immortal. Through the power of the Trinity, he is threefold in his constitution: spiritual, intellectual, physical. Through the power of the seraphim, the great fires were given to him, while from the cherubim he secured his composite form. Hence these spirits are confined within his own nature until man builds that nature to the point where he releases these cosmic powers through giving them adequate expression and no longer limiting them by his own ignorance and perversion. Gonna pause there, folks. You hear that? Let me repeat that for you here, in case you didn't catch all of that. First of all, he says that the disciples of ancient wisdom realized that during the dawn of this earth scheme that certain instructions were deposited in safe places by the sons of the dawn. And that's in capitals, folks, the sons of the dawn, or as we call them, the gods. See, he's talking about a different race of beings here, okay? For this reason, it is said that the kingdom of heaven is within you, for the kingdom of heaven includes, listen to this, and he's saying all of these different spirits reside within you. And, could this be allegorical? Possibly. Or is he speaking literally? I don't know. Who could say for sure? I mean, it's a lot to philosophically take in, but listen to this. This includes the divine Father, his Trinity, his seraphim, cherubim, powers, dominations, principalities, thrones, angels, and archangels. Each of these celestial creatures has contributed something to the nature of man. Through the power of one, he feels. Through the power of another, he sees. Through the power of the third, he speaks. Through the power of the fourth, he understands. Through the power of the divine Father, he is immortal. Through the power of the Trinity, he is threefold in his constitution: spiritual, intellectual, physical. Through the power of the seraphim, the great fires were given to him. Well, from the cherubim, he secured his composite form. Hence, these spirits are confined within his own nature until man builds that nature to the point where he releases these cosmic powers through giving them adequate expression and no longer limiting them by his own ignorance and perversion. So you see, folks, once again, they're giving you this teaching that you are a god. Do you see that? You contain all of this godliness within you, and it's just you have to refine yourself and make yourself, better, improve through time. Listen to their teachings, attend their seminars, follow their teachings, and you too can someday acquire this divinity. Do you hear the absurdity that he speaks here. And yet he calls those who find themselves limited, being human beings as we are, he says that it's because of their own ignorance and perversion. Now, is he talking about some loftier things here? Perhaps he is, and I'm sure his intentions were good. Most of these people that get involved in these things aren't inherently evil, and they really truly believe they're doing good, and they believe they're on the right side of things. But oftentimes, because of how twisted some of these teachings have become, they don't see the forest for the trees. And that's kind of, I think, what's going on here. But let's get back to the reading. I don't want to get too hung up on different ideas like that here, because there's still a lot to cover in here. In truth, the kingdom of heaven is within man far more completely than he realizes. And as heaven is in his own nature, so earth and hell are also in his constitution, for the superior worlds circumscribe and include the inferior, and earth and hell are included within the nature of heaven. As Pythagoras would say, the superior and inferior worlds are included within the area of the supreme sphere. So all the kingdoms of earthly nature, the minerals, the plants, the animals, and his own human spirit are included within his physical body, and he himself is the appointed guardian spirit of the mineral kingdom, and he is responsible to the creative hierarchs for the destiny of the stones and metals. I'm going to pause there, folks. Why do you think the allegory that is alchemy is so important? See, that's what they're talking about. The transmuting the lead into gold. Well, you see, he says here that man is appointed as the guardian spirit of the mineral kingdom, and he's responsible to the creative hierarchs for the destiny of the stones and metals. You see that? That's why they use alchemy as a teaching tool. Okay? That's why they're talking more about spiritual things here than actual physically transmuting lead into gold. That's an allegory, okay? And they use this for these kind of teachings. So, anyway, let's get back on with it here. Next sentence here. Where did we leave off? Right there. Okay. The infernal world is also part of himself, for within his nature is Lucifer, the beast of Babylon, Mammon, Beelzebub, and all the other infernal furies. As the basis of his spine burns an internal fire. At the basis of his spine burns an infernal fire. And the witch's Sabbath, so glowingly described by Eliphas Levi, can be traced to its source in the lower emotional centers of the human body. Thus, man is heaven, earth, and hell in one, and his salvation is much more personal problem than he realizes. Realizing that the human body is a mass of psychic centers, and that during life the form is crisscrossed with endless currents of energy, that all through the form are sunbursts of electric force and magnetic power, man can be seen by those who know how to see as a solar system of stars and planets, suns and moons, with comets in irregular orbits circling through them. As the Milky Way is supposed to be a gigantic cosmic embryo, so man is himself a galaxy of stars, each of which someday will be a constellation in itself. Gonna pause there, folks. You see how he's using the allegory again, the as above, so below allegory here, talking about man as being created in the image of God, and how the greater universe is also created in the image of God. Does that hold true? No, who can say for sure? But he also says here that man is heaven, earth, and hell in one, and his salvation is a much more personal problem than he realizes. What is that saying? So, anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on that idea either, because there's still a lot more to cover here. Let's continue on. Whichever way we look, we find life. Wherever we find life, we find light. For in the midst of all these living things are tiny sparks of immortal splendor. Those whose eyes are chained by earthly limitations see the forms, but to those transcending materiality, each life appears as a gleam of immortal splendor. Even the atmosphere is alive with lights, and the clairvoyant passes through the spheres of flame. There are lights of 1,000 colors and rainbow hues for surpassing in brilliancy the luminosity of the sun, lights 1,000 times more varied than the spectrum that we know, color undreamed of, lights so brilliant they cannot be seen but are felt as ringing sounds in the head, lights that must be heard, others like solid columns of fire that must be felt. Wherever the seer gazes, he beholds fire. It pours from the stone, it flashes in geometric stars from the petals of flowers, and shoots in waves from the fur of animals. It surrounds man with an aureole of radiance, and the earth with a halo of rainbow bands extending miles from its surface. Fire pours light upward through the surface of the earth. It shoots light downward from the empty air. It radiates light outward from the center of everything, and inward from the circumference of everything. It is strange that this universal living splendor was revered. It is man's most perfect symbol of God, for this light is the primary manifestation of the unmanifested and eternal one, this eternal fire. Burning fuelless in the soul of everything has been since the beginning of time the most sacred symbol in all the world. For while figures of wood and stone, paintings on canvas, and even songs are more or less expressions of the form, the physical side of nature, this radiant light, this flaming splendor, is symbolic of the spirit, the life, the immortal germ in the midst of form. It was sacred to the superior deity, and all worshipped it and made offering to it. It was the source, and men worshipped the source, seeking by secret culture handed down through the ages and based upon the instructions of the gods themselves to make that light shine out more gloriously from within themselves. This is the source of fire and light symbolism. Light is not only sacred because it dispels the darkness in which lurk all the enemies of human life. It is also sacred because it is the vehicle of life. This is evidenced by the effect of sunlight upon plant, animal, and human life. Light is also the vehicle of color, the coloring matter of all earthly things being imparted from the sun. It is the vehicle of heat, and according to the wisdom of antiquity, it carries the sperm of all things from the sun. Through light also pass the impulses from the grand man. According to the mysteries, God controls his universe by means of impulses of intelligence which he projects through streamers of visible or invisible light. This light serves the universe in a capacity somewhat similar to that in which the nervous system serves the body. Pythagoras said, "The body of God is composed of the substance of light. Where light is, God is. Who worships light worships God. Who serves light serves God." What more fitting symbol has any man ever conceived of the ever-living, pulsating Divine Father than the living, pulsating, radiating fire? Fire is the most sacred of all elements, and the most ancient of all symbols. This being the case, the ancients were not without reason and philosophy when they accepted fire or light as their supreme symbol, and chose as the emblem of the universal light the central glory of the sun. In so doing, they became not sun worshippers, but worshippers of God, as he manifests himself through the light of truth. The fire philosophers worshipped three lights: the light of the sun, that of the earth, and that of the soul. This latter being the light in man, which they believed would ultimately be reabsorbed into the divine light from which it was temporarily separated by the prison walls of man's lower nature. The mysteries of all ages were dedicated to the reunion of the little light with the great light, its father and source. To the Gnostics, Christ was the colorless divine light which assumed the form of radiant splendor, and it says in parentheses here, truth, that it might minister unto the needs of the little light struggling for expression in the soul of every human creature. This divine light entered into the light of nature, and by strengthening the latter, assisted the vitalizing of all living things. The light in man, the God in miniature, was saved, or more correctly, released, by a process called regeneration. The secret method used to effect this release without the long spiral path of evolutionary progress, was the great and supreme secret of the mysteries, revealed only to those who had proven themselves worthy to be entrusted with the power of life and death. These mysteries are perpetuated today in Freemasonry. Gonna pause there, folks. You hear that? The secret method used to effect this release without the long spiral path of evolutionary progress was the great and supreme secret of the mysteries. You hear it again? Evolution, evolutionary process, becoming the Ubermensch, the Superman, the next step in human evolution, the transcendence to godhood, transhumanism. It's all these things. This is what these secret mystery teachings have always taught. They've always taught man what has been acknowledged in the Bible as the great lie, that man can be as God. You see, it all goes back to the fall in the Garden of Eden again. Man can be as God. That's what they are openly teaching in these secret societies. Man will become God through his intellect. See, that's what they teach. That's what it's all about. And he says that right here. Instead of the long spiral path of evolutionary progress, they're taking the shortcut, folks. That's what they're trying to teach. That's what they're claiming to teach. That's what they're claiming to do. That's why they're going for transhumanism. See? It's the shortcut, the next evolutionary step. Or so they say. So they see. And you see in these admissions here made by Mr. Manly P. Hall in this book, they believe in this concept of evolution and that man evolved from something inferior way back when and is becoming God. He's evolving into God. He will be God. You see, that's what they teach. And it's a perversion, folks. Let's go back to the reading, though. The Masonic Order is founded in the secret schools of the pagan antiquity, many of the symbols of which are preserved to this day in the various degrees of the Blue Lodge and the Scottish Rite. Concerning the origin of the name Freemason, which is itself a key to the doctrines of the order, Robert Hewitt Brown, 32nd degree Mason, writes, "Long before the building of the King Solomon's Temple, Masons were known as the Sons of Light. Masonry was practiced by the ancients under the name of Lux," and that would be in parentheses light, or its equivalent in the various languages of antiquity. We are informed by several distinguished writers that the word masonry, it says in parentheses, is a corruption of the Greek word mesouraneo, which signifies, "I am in the midst of heaven," alluding to the sun, which, being in the midst of heaven, is the great source of light. Others derive it directly from the ancient Egyptian Phre, the sun, and Mas, a child, Freemason, children of the sun or sons of light. Gonna pause there, folks. There it is again. Freemason. Okay? Sons of light. It never had anything to do with stoneworking. That was just an exoteric utility that they used in order to promote their quote-unquote craft, you see. Yes, there were stonemason guilds, and they used some of the hand signals and things of these stonemason guilds and used some of their craftsmen to learn these different geometric concepts, but that was never the origin of Freemasons. It was never about building architecture or that kind of thing. Before that, it was all about being the sons of light, you see. Anyway, let's get back to the reading. The true secret of the regeneration of the fire in the human soul is revealed by the ritual of the third degree of the Blue Lodge, under the allegory of the murder of Hiram Abiff. The name Hiram is, as has already been noted, closely related to the element of fire. His direct descent from Tubal-Cain, the first great worker of metals by means of fire, still further connects this cunning worker of metals with the immortal life flame in man. Gonna pause there again, folks. You hear that? Hiram Abiff, this mythical figure of Freemasonry, is a direct descendant of Tubal-Cain. You see, they're making that reference here again. Tubal-Cain. Okay? That's of the lineage and line of Cain. They believe themselves to have the divine right to rule. See? Anyway, let's get back to this. In his Secret Societies of All Ages, Charles W. Heckthorn gives an old Kabbalistic legend in connection with the relation of early Masonry to the worship of fire. According to this legend, Hiram Abiff was not a descendant of Adam or Jehovah, as were the sons of Seth, but was born of a nobler race. For in his blood ran the fire of Samael, one of the Elohim. Further, there are two kinds of people in the world, those with aspiration and those without. Those without aspiration are the sons of Seth, true children of the earth, who cling to their parent with tenacity, and the key word of their nature is earthiness. Do you hear this, folks? I'm going to pause right there. Do you hear what he just told you? Okay? He's saying here that Hiram Abiff, and Hiram Abiff representing any of the Freemasons, was not a descendant of Adam or Jehovah. See, he was not, as were the sons of Seth, which were the actual people. See, they're claiming to be, but he was born of a nobler race, for in his blood ran the fire of Samael, one of the Elohim. See, this is the story of the fallen angels. This is what some of them in the secret societies believe, that Eve had a child from Samael, and that was Cain. And this is the divine bloodline. This is why these people are obsessed with bloodlines, you see, because they believe they have the divine right to rule, that they're semi-divine, that they're a different species than you and I. Do you understand? Do you understand now what is the basis of eugenics? What's the basis of evolution? All of these different ideas. Why they do this stuff, why they try to create these great divides between people. They think they're a different species than us. Truly. See, and they do this through their attitude, because you see, they equate that there are two kinds of people, those with aspiration and those who do not have aspiration. Those who do not have aspiration are the sons of Seth, true children of the earth, who cling to their parent with tenacity, and the key word of their nature is earthiness. They cling. They're the bitter clingers, folks. You remember Obama talking about bitter clingers with their guns and their religion? Bitter clingers. That's what they're equating us to. Okay? That's what they're equating the common man to. They think they're better. They think that, the people are lazy. See, this is the division between the masses and the ruling class. See, they view themselves, they're the ruling class. They have aspirations. They're willing to do the work. They're willing to work hard to achieve the things they want, whereas the masses are just comfortable to go along to get along and will do whatever they're told. The useless eaters, that's what they call them. The useless eaters. The masses. Do you see? This is the division, the class division, the rulers and the ruled. And they see the sons of Seth as the ruled. And they are the ruling class. These are the sons of fire. Let's continue on in Manly P. Hall's own words. Let's continue. There is another race who are sons of fire, for they are descendants of Samael, the regent of fire. These flame-born sons are ever fired with ambition and aspiration. They are the builders of cities, the raisers of monuments, the conquerors of worlds, the pioneers, the workers in metals, true sons of the eternal flame. Fiery and tempestuous are their souls, and earth to them is a burden. Jehovah does not answer their prayers, for they are sons of another star. Aspiration is the keynote of their nature. And again they raise, phoenix-like, from the ashes of failure. Never will they rest, like the element of which they are a part. They are wanderers upon the face of the earth, which their eyes upon the flaming star from which they came. This fundamental difference is plainly visible in daily life. Some are always contented, others never reach the goal. Some are the sons of water, the keepers of flocks. Others are sons of fire, the builders of cities. One group is conservative, the other is progressive. One is the king, the other the priest. But within the nature of every living thing, the sons of fire and the sons of water exist together. In the scriptures, the flame-born ones are called the sons of God, and the water-born are referred to as the daughters of men. For the flame-born son is the divinity in man, and the water-born is the humanity in man. These two brothers are deadly enemies, but in the mysteries They are taught to cooperate one with the other and are symbolized in Freemasonry as the double-headed eagle of the 33rd degree. Gonna pause there, folks. You see? They believe they're a different racial stock of people. They think that they are the sons of fire, the philosophers of fire. They have ambition. They have this drive to succeed. They're the builders, the creators. They're the movers and shakers, the people that do stuff in this world, where the rest of us are just content to just be sheep herders and just go along to get along. See, we're the sheep. We're the ruled. They're the rulers. And that's how they view things. But in the same breath, he talks about how these different aspects exist in all people, and that the ultimate goal is the balance of these things, and it's signified by the double-headed eagle of the 33rd degree. See, they're taught to cooperate with one another. This is why there's infighting at the topmost levels of things. You see, the philosophers of fire, these sons of Cain, as it were, or Samael, and the sons of the Seth, or the sons of the waters of faith, there's this distinction and separation. The sons of Seth are considered the priestcraft, whereas the sons of Cain are considered the governing class, you see. That's why we have the separation between church and state. Statecraft. The art of masonry is statecraft. These secret societies are all about governance, governing, controlling, building. Statecraft. So see, the ultimate goal is to combine statecraft with this religious craft or churchcraft, and they've succeeded in doing so in several ways. The Vatican, notably, has done so. Okay? This has been one of the great experiments that they've done through the use of these secret societies and secret society groups. The Jesuits have done this. The Freemasons have done this. They work together at the topmost levels of these secret societies. It's the same group of people running things. See, that's the big secret there. It's the same group of people, but they use these conflicting aspects of mankind for the purpose of control. This is the true Hegelian dialectic here. And it goes back to the ancient mystery schools. It's a control mechanism, and they use it well for their purposes. Let's get back to the reading, though. We're almost done here, folks. Stick with me. It gets more interesting from here. According to the ancient wisdom, a time will come when man has two complete spinal systems, both equally developed, and his life will be controlled by two powers working in unity, one with the other. To express this, the ancient alchemists symbolized attainment as a two-headed figure, one head male and the other female. The androgynous Ishwara, the planetary lord of the Brahmins, has the right half of his body male and the left half female. To symbolize that, he is the archetype for the ultimate human race. Man, then, being positive and negative in one, will no longer reproduce himself as at the present time. One of the ancient mysteries taught that the end of all things is like the beginning plus the experience of the cycle, and someday the human race will give birth to its new bodies out of its own nature, as certain primitive animals still do. Then indeed will man be his own father and his own mother, complete in himself. Initiation makes possible this process in man much earlier than the natural sequence of human evolution would permit it. Such is the true mystery of Melchizedek, king of Salem, the priest king, priest, water, king, fire, it says in parentheses, who was his own father and his own mother, and in whose footsteps all initiates follow. Gonna pause there, folks. You hear that? What's the ultimate goal of human evolution? Well, this male-female combination, this androgynous combination, to the next phase of human evolution, transhumanism. They're talking about transhumanism. Manly P. Hall's talking about transhumanism. It wasn't said, expressed in those exact words back in the way he says it here, but this is what it's all about. It's a spiritual idea, folks. It's not just science, like they would have you believe, the advent of science with things. It's spiritual as well, and we're in a spiritual battle right now. And this is what's going on. Now, let's continue on, because this next part is going to blow your socks off. And I quote here from Mr. Manly P. Hall, continuing on. The highest of all occult orders which exists only in the inner world may be called the Order of Melchizedek, although among certain nations it has other names. This order is composed entirely of the graduates of the other mystery schools who have actually reached the point where they can give birth to their present selves out of their own natures, like the mysterious phoenix bird, which, breaking open at death, permits a new bird to fly forth. The phoenix was once regarded as an actual zoological rarity, but it is now known that it never existed other than a symbol of a high stage in the development of man. The phoenix built its nest out of flames, which is exceedingly significant. The secret order of Melchizedek can never appear in the physical world while humanity is constituted according to its present plan. It is the supreme mystery school, and a few have reached the point where they have blended their divine and human natures so perfectly that they are symbolically two-headed. The heart and mind must be brought together into perfect equilibrium before true thinking or true spirituality can be attained. The highest function of the mind is reason. The highest function of the heart is intuition, a sensing process not necessitating the normal working of the mind. Reason alone is heartless. Feeling alone is mindless. But these two blended together temper justice with mercy and kindliness with strength. The spirit is neither male nor female, but both, an androgynous entity. The perfect manifestation of the androgynous spirit must be through an androgynous body, which is self-generating. But many millions of years must pass before the human race learns the lessons of polarity sufficiently well to assume this nature with intelligence. In that day, everything will be complete unto itself. Understanding will be mature, and there will be a depth and broadness which cannot be manifest through either a male or female organism alone. Such is the mystery of the priest king, and such was the position which Jesus reached when he called a priest forever. When he was called a priest forever of the order of Melchizedek. All this is symbolized in the emblems of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. Gonna pause there again, folks. Do you hear that? Do you now understand why transgenderism is being so heavily pushed and promoted in our society? Do you see where this is going? Do you understand that all this stuff is the stepping stones into transhumanism, and that's where they're pushing it, and they see this goal being attainable within the very near future for themselves? Do you understand what's going on here? Do you see who's running the show here, who's really calling the shots in this world? It's this secret order known as the Order of Melchizedek, and they're also called other names, folks. And that's the thing, that they're under a hidden guise, okay? Always under a hidden guise. And I will say again, no good can come from secrecy. It is one of the first and most effective mind control tools ever developed, secrecy. Jesus said, "In secret have I taught you nothing," okay? That should give you an indication of what is the spirit behind this stuff, okay? So, these people, they work in secret. They have secret orders. They do stuff covertly that does not benefit the mass of humanity. What does that tell you? Anyway, let's continue on. We're almost finished here. Where did we leave off? Okay. When considered clairvoyantly, the body of man resembles a great bouquet of flowers, for all over the physical form are petal-like groups of emanating force rays of various shapes and colors. There is one of these mysterious centers in the palm of each hand and in the sole of each foot. Nearly all the vital organs have whirling or radiating vortices of light as spiritual bases. These spinning, vibrating flowers are extremely important occult centers. Each of them is capable, under certain conditions, of assisting man to secure a broader function of consciousness. It is possible to see with the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. In fact, ultimately, man will see with all parts of his body. A symbol of this ultimate condition was preserved in the Egyptian mysteries by the figure of Osiris, who is often shown sitting upon a throne, his entire body composed of eyes. The Greek god Argus was also noted for his ability to see with different parts of his body. The Oriental Buddhas are often symbolized as having peculiar geometric patterns on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. The famous footprints of Buddha carved in stone have a miniature sun just in front of the heel of each foot. Some of the Japanese jiu-jitsu artists are acquainted with the secret science of these mysterious nerve centers, although knowledge has been concealed from the majority of the Japanese wrestlers. There are charts in Japan which show the exact location of these sacred centers. The slightest pressure upon certain of them will paralyze the entire body, so great is their control over the rest of the nerve system. The jiu-jitsu exponents are also taught how they can resuscitate a person who is absolutely dead by means of pressure brought to bear on certain points in the upper vertebrae of the spine. This is successful in nearly every case, often after all other methods have failed. The sunbursts of vari-colored lights in the body constitute the sacred lotus blossoms of India and Egypt, and the roses of the Rosicrucians. They are also the immortal beads of the Bhagavad Gita, strung upon a single thread. It is through these centers that the nails of the crucifixion were driven. The crucifixion contains the secret of opening the flower centers in the hands, feet, side, and head. The 3 nails which accomplish this are preserved to Freemasonry as the 3 leading officers of a lodge and the 3 murderers of Hiram Abiff. The Mexican Indian Osiris, called Prince Co, died from 3 wounds inflicted by his enemies, and his heart was found in an urn by Augustus Le Plongeon, who spent many years in investigating Central American antiquities. The relationship between these sacred centers and the jewels in the breastplate of the High Priest of Israel must not be overlooked, for both symbols have a similar meaning. The most sacred part of the human body is the brain and spinal system, revered from all antiquity and symbolized again and again in all the religions of the world. While other parts of the body are of great interest to the student, the mysterious working of the spinal fires, by means of which liberation is finally attained, is so tremendous that many years must be spent in understanding even the fundamental principles. The spine is the rod which budded the Yggdrasil tree, the flaming sword, the staff of comfort, the wand of the Magi. And that's the end of part 2, folks. Now, in part 3, we're going to get into a lot of different things involving physiology, and particularly the spinal cord and the brain and the human nervous system, and many of the interesting occult and philosophical ideas associated with that. But in closing here tonight, do you have a little better understanding, a clearer idea of who these people at the topmost levels of the power structure of our society are? What they believe, what they're looking for, what they plan to do, who they think they are, and who they think we are? Do you get that? This is not just one book or one author of these occult ideas that you could find these different ideas with. Okay? This is their ideology. This is their belief system. This is absolutely the things they act upon. This is not just some idiot in front of a microphone here telling you a made-up story here about what these secret societies and stuff are teaching. This is well documented in many of their works that were never intended to get out to the public. These are important ideas. These are things we need to keep in mind. We need to discuss. We need to make known. For all things will become known. There's no secret which will not be made available to the public at some point. We are living in the days of Revelation, in my view, folks. This is what's going on. All these things are being revealed now. This is who's been in charge of the world for the longest time. This is why always things are, directed against the public at large. This is why there's so much corruption in government. This is absolutely why. This is what's going on in the world today. These are the people who are in control right now, and they use all kinds of secret methods and means to control us, and they've got this down to a science. They've figured it all out, and we are marching along like marionettes to their little game. And we need to stand up and say no, because we outnumber them by very, very many. So we need to make known to people, you're being manipulated, you're being used, you're viewed as nothing more than cattle. They view you as nothing more than an animal to be used and abused to suit their needs, whatever it may be. These are the people running our country. These are the people running our world, folks. This is absolutely what they believe. You may think all this is nonsense, and that's your prerogative. You could believe it all to be nonsense, but I guarantee you there are people in positions of power in this world that absolutely believe and act on these ideas and principles. So, with that being said, we will continue on to part 3 another night. But as for now, have a good night, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me.